Are we not using the raise hand feature? Are we just raising your hand?
Yes, that's fine. We thought that was the easiest, least confusing way to manage it.
And we're back online streaming. It should be working. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, if we are finished with public comments, I would like to move to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
All right. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda tonight? Seeing none, I will go to Mr. Kennard to do a roll call vote to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Perthridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
and Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll move on to resolutions now. Mr. Kennard, when you get a chance, if you will please read our first resolution.
Certainly. A resolution repealing City of Oxford's revolving loan fund rules and procedures and adopting a new City of Oxford revolving loan fund rules and procedures. And I believe Mr. Elliott will be talking about that.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
This resolution encourages the Area 1 Court to suspend or delay for at least 60 days after the stay-at-home order is vacated all evictions. It was requested by Councilors Bracken, Ragu, and Vice Mayor Snavely. I've been in communication with the Area 1 Court, and there are only 4 eviction cases in Oxford pending since the governor declared a state of emergency on
Hey,
March
Doug,
9th.
I think we've got our resolutions mixed up.
Yeah, Chris read the second resolution and Doug is responding to the first resolution.
Resolution, yes.
Oh, I
And-
didn't pick that up. Sorry.
And I want to make sure Chris has a copy of the first resolution.
Well, I'm going from a document that Mary Ann provided for me for the meeting on Tuesday, and the first resolution she has was the changing of the rules for the revolving loan fund.
Yeah,
Am I looking at the wrong agenda?
yes, we
Yeah.
added another.
We have a
Let me,
agenda.
let me pull up the other agenda that I printed that isn't the cheat sheet.
Do you want me to read the title?
Good idea.
Okay, Chris, I'll read the title. A resolution encouraging the Area 1 Court of Butler County to immediately suspend or delay for at least 60 days after the stay-at-home order is vacated, all evictions that occur due to economic hardship caused by the coronavirus pandemic. And so I'll read my comment again,
Wait,
my
can I-
brief comment.
Can I get a motion to adopt?
this-
please?
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me.
seconded,
All right, great. Okay, now go ahead, Doug.
All right. This resolution encourages the Area 1 Court to suspend or delay for at least 60 days after the stay-at-home order is vacated all evictions. It was requested by Councilors Bracken, Ragu, and Vice Mayor Snavely. I've been in communications with the Area 1 Court, and there are only 4 eviction cases in Oxford pending since the governor declared a state of emergency on March 9th. None of these hearings will be scheduled until after May 31st. I would recommend passage of this resolution, and I'll turn it back to you, Your Honor.
All right, I'll ask for public comment, but I think we maybe received some letters on this, which will be put into the minutes, but I don't think we have any active public comment. So I will open it up to council for discussion. Raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment, and I'll call on you. Councilor Ragu, hit your mute button.
Yeah, I think that I'm happy that the court has decided to put a stay on evictions until May 31st. I think that the question is that what's going to happen after May 31st, because will rent all of a sudden be due? You know, I know that our colleagues in the federal government are working on trying to get rent forgiveness and mortgage suspensions. Because we know whenever something goes into forbearance, if we're looking at mortgages, that all that money is due all at once, and that can be a really big hassle for a lot of people whenever they're out of work. And I think that this point right now, we're okay for May 31st. We're keeping people safe and in their homes, and they're able to follow their shelter in place for the sake of public safety and morality too. But I think that as a city, the things that we should consider is what's going to happen after this evictions happens or is over. So whenever we have people who are situationally homeless and experiencing homelessness, what is our plan? I think we need to be looking at that to develop how are we going to respond to homelessness after this is over, if those protections aren't already in place. And I think the other things also are we need to be thinking about after this emergency is over, what moratoriums are we going to initiate so that people aren't all of a sudden being evicted at that time. And the last thing that I'll bring up is that we need to think about neighborhood preservation, that we are going to have a lot of people coming in and buying property that people no longer can afford. And what are we going to do as a city to try to protect our neighborhoods, and considering things like land trusts and just neighborhood preservation. So I think that there's this ongoing thing. This is just a temporary ban for the next couple of months, but going forward, what are we going to do to try to keep people from being homeless, and what's our plan, and then how are we going to try to preserve our neighborhoods? So I'm looking forward to how we can be creative, just like Mayor Mike was talking about, how we can be creative to try to anticipate what are the problems that are coming from the pandemic, and then how are we going to respond to it.
All right. Great discussion. Anyone else? Councilor Prithridge?
So my question is to Mr. Connor, because you've looked into the law on this, and I think we all agree that we're really concerned about evictions, and we want to do everything we can to support people and avoid homelessness. But so that people in the public can understand what actually it is that we can do as a city. I mean, the ordinance encourages the Area 1 courts, but we can talk about bans and things like that. But what's the practical implication of us sending a resolution encouraging a county court to suspend? So can you talk about what legal basis we have to do so and what practical implication this is likely to have?
Certainly. The threshold question is, what is the legal effect of a resolution or a pronouncement from any council? This is not just Oxford, this is across the state. And the first part of that analysis is going back to when we were all in school, the separation of powers. This would be considered a mandate to from the legislative branch on how to the judicial branch should function. And Ohio follows the separation of powers of the three branches. So the resolution is simply a statement of what I would call will of the council. The power to change the procedure can happen one of two ways. If one has been following the governor's press conferences, when House Bill 197 was passed, that was done in tandem, at least as it related to the judiciary, with the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court also suspending statutes of limitations, the local rules for courts. And so the power to put a moratorium in place on evictions would come from one of two power sources. One, it could be the courts themselves. The Supreme Court could mandate it in some way. Although I think that's unlikely that the court would ever step in under those circumstances. The second is that the Ohio legislature would have that power. What we've seen is a recognition, and I think it's a rightful recognition, that the governor has, in the Ohio Department of Health and the Ohio Supreme Court, have said these are guidances that we're providing to local communities, and as local communities, we want to empower each community to do what the community thinks is best in their given circumstances, because Cleveland's not the same as Oxford. I can tell you that there are that almost every community is taking some steps. We know that the federal government has issued stays on eviction proceeding in federally funded housing, and also doing the same for foreclosures where there's HUD financing. So I think the spirit is there. I can tell you in terms of what I know lawyers are advising clients. There's a recognition that the long-term interest is to try and work with tenants. And there are probably some other considerations that residential tenants should be, or pardon me, residential landlords should be mindful of. That if there's a disproportionate impact, there are potential liability exposures to landlords. I'm sure that legal aid and other housing advocacy groups are going to be looking into that. So there's a very complicated landscape there. But I think from purely a business standpoint, I know I'm kind of getting beyond your question a little bit, but there are practical realities to the eviction process in addition to whatever the courts may or may not do in any jurisdiction. So that kind of gave you a comprehensive answer there, and I'll stop talking now.
So thank you. I'll just follow up with a comment, which is I agree with the spirit of this entirely. I just hope that we're clear about what it is we're actually doing. We passed resolutions urging the legislature in Columbus to do stuff, and it may or may not have practical influence on what the legislature does. It expresses our will, but just so the public understands that we're not directly influencing or changing eviction policies. We're just asking the courts to do so. Is that correct? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that is correct. It's a request because we don't have the power to mandate.
Glenn, do you have Councilor Ellerby?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with David's comment. I want to also make sure that we are very specific regarding economic impact, because based on the research that I've done and some anecdotal conversations with some individuals that are in the legal system, the reason why the eviction policies are in place the way that they are currently in Butler County is because there are emergency evictions for items that are not financial related. Now that everyone is forced to stay at home, there are real and present dangers regarding individuals in abusive households because now they have to be there. There's no option to go to school or to go to work. They have to live with their abusers. And it can get bad enough where they may have to do an emergency eviction. So I just wanted to make sure that we don't use a broad-based, I guess you would say moratorium. I just want to make sure that if we're worried about financial or economic hardship, that we specifically state that in any resolutions that we choose to pass.
Back to Councilor Ragu.
Yeah, and if you read the resolution, you can see that it did state that in the beginning about what the request is for and that it's related to COVID-19 financial devastation. So that is a good point, that there are victims of intimate partner violence and domestic violence and child abuse, but that is not what this request is. And also, if you look at other moratoriums on evictions from other cities and states, it is very specifically tailored that it does not imply that a victim from intimate partner violence has to be, that isn't part of this, that those evictions can still play. So there's so many other cities and states that are doing what they can to make sure people stay safe. And I think that there is ways to be creative, that maybe approaching it as mandating a court to do it isn't the best, but as this problem evolves and if things last longer than we anticipate them to, we need to look at what are other cities doing, and a lot of them are actually tailored towards the landlords themselves.
All right, I'm also going to take this time again to send out a plea to our landlords to continue to work with your tenants during this time. I think I'm hearing only good things at this point. I haven't heard any bad things. So I know people want to keep their tenants at all levels, commercial and residential, but I just plead with the landlords to continue to work with your tenants as much as you can until we get through this. And hopefully that will work. All right, we have no other comments. Are we ready to vote? Then I will ask Mr. Kennard to please call the roll.
As a point for the record, who made the motion and who made the second, please?
I made the motion.
I made the second.
Thank you. Now for the roll call. Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithridge,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes. The resolution is adopted. We will now move on to our second resolution. So Mr. Kennard, if you will reread that resolution, we'll begin with that.
I will, and I found the new agenda. So, a resolution repealing the City of Oxford's revolving loan fund rules and procedures and adopting a new City of Oxford revolving loan fund rules and procedures.
All right, may I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Mr.
Seconded.
Smith, and a second by Mr. Ellerby. All right, and I will turn this over to staff. I believe we have some presentation materials.
Well, on this one, I'll just read out what we have.
Okay, all right.
So the current revolving loan fund rules and procedures were amended by resolution of City Council on May 5th, 2009. The current rules and procedures only permit funding for the creation of new jobs for low and moderate income persons. The HUD eligible activities include the retention of jobs for low and moderate income persons. I'm recommending that the rules be revised to include the retention of jobs during an emergency declaration by the Governor of Ohio or the Oxford City Manager. The current fund balance in the revolving loan fund is $550,000. The city, through the CIC, can provide loan assistance for the retention of jobs for low and moderate income persons working for our small businesses during this health and economic crisis. I recommend that council adopt the emergency legislation to amend the Oxford revolving loan fund rules and procedures. And in order to pass it as an emergency, it will require a 3/4 vote of council, which would mean 6 members need to vote for this. We did receive one comment. It was after we had actually posted on our website that you could no longer add comments. So we're going to need to figure out how this comment came in. But since we do have it, I would like to read it. This comment is from Houston Kiger of 17 Jeffrey Drive. And basically, the revolving fund has been a successful program in Oxford. This is due in part to the stringent rules put in place to make sure that the projects for which the funds are being used are strong business plans and things Oxford desires. I hope that giving the city manager's office carte blanche on use of the funds does not deplete the accounts to where it can no longer help future projects. I understand that this COVID-19 employment situation is real. I am living it every day. I want to help those in need, but I also want to be able to help local entrepreneurs open businesses far into the future. I hope that some guidance is given to how these funds can be used and hope that the fund will be replenished in the coming year or two. Thanks. And that's all I have.
All right. With that, I'll open it up to council discussion. I just want to make sure everybody understands what this does. It basically loosens up the rules on the revolving loan fund. It was a little more stringent as to what the fund could be used for, but there's quite a bit of money in there. So we thought if that could be made available to help keep some businesses going, we could make it available. Yes, Councilor Snavely.
I just think that we need to do whatever we can to support our local citizens. I think that's what the first resolution was about, and I think that's what this one is about. And so these are extraordinary times, and I think we need to do what we can to support our local business. The resolution we passed at our last meeting was about helping local business, and so I think we should continue to do that.
All right. Councilor Ellerby.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to give a little bit more reasoning behind why this came to council. So the revolving loan fund is for the attraction, creation, and retention of local businesses in Oxford. And this adjustment is for the retention of those local businesses in Oxford. We actually, I mean, we really value our local businesses and we want to make sure that they stay through these unprecedented times. And that is the reason for this amendment. And I also know that after this extraordinary circumstance has passed, then we can come back and readjust that to its original language.
Right. Yes, what Glenn said is absolutely right. Councilor Prithrick?
So first, I want to commend the city manager and staff and others for looking at, because this is a fairly significant pool of money that often goes underutilized. And so now is a time, it's really nice to have it. I guess, so I think this is a good way to go, because this is within the broad spectrum of what these revolving loan funds are used for in other places. It's true, Mr. Kiger's point about we have been relatively stringent in its use, which is why most of the businesses have succeeded, but also why a lot of the funds are still there. So I guess my question is for Mr. Elliott, that, I mean, people will still have to go through a loan application process and it will still be reviewed by the revolving loan fund committee. So it's not a carte blanche, you know, we're loosening the rules, but there are still our rules as far as the use of the revolving loan fund. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a really good comment to make. If you had a chance to read through the rules, the changes are in red. So yes, they will go through an application process and all the rules will stay in place. The biggest change is that before, we only focused on the creation of new jobs. And this will allow us to also retain existing jobs.
So just a follow-on point then, the caveat is, though, it's in the event of a gubernatorial emergency declaration. We have not had very many of those in Ohio, and I'm not exactly sure how long a gubernatorial emergency declaration could last. And it could be that some of the need to retain the job could be in immediate economic aftermath. So to me, I'm just like, what does exactly mean in the event of? So for example, does a person need to make an application? I don't know how long the governor's declaration is going to last. But it could be that they have the need as a result of the emergency declaration. So how stringent, like, do you think that application needs to be? Like, if the emergency declaration ends on June 15th, then is that no longer applicable? Or that's my.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we put this agenda together pretty quickly, but my comment there would be that we might come back to council with a recommendation to extend it for an additional period of time. You know, I think the program has been a really good program. We've helped a lot of local businesses, and, you know, so the foundation is good, but this is unusual situation that we're in, and we felt it really demanded that we be creative and come up with some ways to help our business beyond just the creation of new jobs.
No, I'm totally in support. I just think we may find, because I think the economic aftermath of all of this may extend beyond the epidemiological part. So, you know, we may find that we come back to this. So I hope people use it because it's a great resource. So thank you again for this.
All right. If there are no other questions, Mr. Kennard, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithrick,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu, Ms. Southard,
yes,
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes. All right, the resolution is adopted.
I've heard worse.
Okay.
Hopefully not from me.
Now we will move on to ordinances. We have, I will just ask Mr. Kennard to do the first reading of our first ordinance, please.
An ordinance creating the Oxford Small Business Stimulus Program and declaring an emergency.
May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right. And I will turn it over to staff.
Okay, I'm just going to make a few comments, and then I'm going to ask Jessica to present a PowerPoint to go through this with you. So we keep talking about this current health crisis and the fact that our small business community is struggling to survive. I myself have spoken to many small business owners who have either closed or greatly reduced operations. Our small business community employs many, many full and part-time employees who have been either laid off or had their hours reduced significantly. And our small businesses together are most likely our largest employer after Miami University. They're certainly a vital part of our small college community. So for all these reasons and more, I'm proposing that council consider a local Oxford small business stimulus program. The CIC reviewed this proposal last week and unanimously voted to support it. And Jessica, as I said, will present a PowerPoint for you. I do want to remind you that we have this on as emergency legislation, so it will require 6 votes of City Council for adoption, and it'll become effective immediately. And then also, we did receive one request to speak tonight from Ann Camphouse, owner of Books and Brews. So I'll turn it over to Jessica. Jessica?
Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to go through this PowerPoint. I did share this with the Community Improvement Corporation before this meeting, and this is what we kind of came up with as our outline for our small business stimulus proposal. The first part is a gift card program, and the process would be that the city would donate $200,000 to the CIC board, and the CIC board would then send out applications to all area businesses in the city of Oxford for them to then request gift card purchases. The CIC board has nominated a committee that will review the applications and determine who to purchase the gift cards from. And the board of directors will have full authority to implement this program. So it's going to be the CIC board's program. They will then purchase the gift cards and set up an e-commerce website. And the goal is to then resell these gift cards to the general public. And I believe the CIC board is recommending that these gift cards not be used until after August 1st, when our student population returns. So the administrative process would be that the CIC will operate the program. They will set up an e-commerce website to resell the gift cards and deliver them. And we'll work with several community partners to help promote the sales. So including Enjoy Oxford, the Chamber, the city, and maybe even some others. The goal is the sale of these gift cards will refurbish this account at CIC for future economic stimulus efforts. The eligibility would be brick and mortar businesses located within the city limits in the city of Oxford, Ohio. And the program is aimed at the for-profit industry impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Typically that rely on walk-in customers. So this includes restaurants, bars, salons, barbershops, retailers, service industry. And while everyone can apply, we would probably give preference to those locally owned businesses. Funds are primarily to be used for payroll purposes and to keep people employed. The applicant must be the owner of the business. They must be an active, lawful, and have necessary and required licenses at this time. They need to have less than 50 employees on their payroll, and they cannot be a direct sale company. This would be an online application process. If you approve this tonight, I'll probably email it out tomorrow. We've been working really hard on the past week to get an active email address for every single business in town, and I think we're darn close. I mean, there might be a few that we'll miss, but I will also share this on social, and if we don't have an email address registered with the utility that we have for that business, we will create a flyer that will go out to them via the mail. But after review and approval by the CIC board, they can begin to purchase the gift cards. Some known risks and challenges. This program does have administrative costs. However, if done successfully, it can rebuild that stimulus fund within the CIC. The biggest challenge is determining how to resell the gift cards and how to administer that, but I feel like we can figure it out. The other risk is that not all gift cards may be resold back to the public, or a business may close and then the gift cards become invalid, so we have to kind of eat that cost. I'm going to stop there. I do have the, other things to kind of share, but I'll stop there and answer any questions you have about this proposal, if any. And then I wasn't sure, Mayor Smith, is this when we want Ann to speak as well?
I would say as soon as you're done, and if there are no direct questions to you, then we can give Ann her time, and then council can have discussion.
Okay.
So,
Let me see Ann real quick. Hold on just a minute.
okay.
Okay, Ann, did you want to speak? You're unmuted now. I'm not sure if Ann can hear us.
Can you hear
Ann?
me?
We can, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say that, well, thank you very much for coming up with the proposal. I've talked to several other restaurants and bar owners, and everyone thought that this was very fair and something that was well thought out, and everyone was ready and willing to apply and participate in. And I don't know if we necessarily need to wait till August to roll it out. That was my only kind of question. But again, I think that is when maybe we could sell more of them from that standpoint. But I don't know if the August thing, I'm not real clear on why the August date was picked, but maybe you can explain that a little more.
You
I'd
wanna
be
touch-
happy to.
Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
To clarify, we would purchase the gift cards right away from businesses for an immediate into their bank accounts, but then some of the businesses commented, well, while the students are gone, they weren't sure they wanted the gift cards to then be redeemed. And so the thought was to buy them right now, sit on them for a little while, and then have businesses start to accept them to be redeemed once the students are returned. However, I mean, we're happy to amend that. That was just some initial feedback we had received.
And I understand that too. I do know that there are several students that are still here. Actually, right across the street from Books and Brews, there's a family that moved here from New York City to stay with their daughter. So I mean, there will be people here in town currently that would want to use them now.
So we're happy to amend that if needed. So I'll stop there.
That's
Okay.
all I had. Thanks.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks for help working with us on the technology and participating. I think Councilor Snavely has got a question.
More of a comment. I think the waiting until August 1st is a good idea, because until then, I think the businesses as they open would rather have people come in and make original purchases at that time and not have the gift cards take away from that income that they're going to need to get started up. So I would not be in favor of removing the August 1st deadline.
Doug?
And basically that was the idea, was an infusion of cash to meet some of their obligations. It's patterned after what the city of Hamilton did. And of course, they have a different economy, shall we say, than we do right now. They still have all their residents there doing takeout and stuff. And so they incorporated a 60-day delay. And like Jessica said, based on comments that were received at the CIC meeting in some businesses, that's why we went with a longer delay.
Councilor Raghu.
My internet cut out, so I'm not sure if you said my name.
Yes, I did. Go ahead.
Anne, you're still there, right, Anne? Do you feel like the other businesses that you had talked to had some hesitation about August, or do you feel like you just had questions about that date? because I don't know, just as a small business owner, I'm you know your finances best, and so I'm just curious about what your cohort has said.
I was just trying to understand why the August. I think Jessica's explained it now. I do understand it. I think everyone would just like to, yeah, I think the initial infusion of a little bit more revenue would be great. But yes, right now, I know I'm staying alive with a lot of carryout business. I can't speak for some of the other places I've talked to. I haven't actually talked to anyone this week. So I think the August thing is okay with me. I just didn't understand it. Now I do.
Okay, great. Counselor Southard?
I have heard from the public, from citizens, that they're going to receive the $1,200 per person, and a couple will receive $2,400 from the government. And they said, well, we don't need that money, and we'd like to find a way to use that money. And where could we donate it? And I suggested, not this program is a possibility, and I think it's a very good possibility of a way to encourage, to keep Oxford vibrant. And people were happy with that idea as a way to invest the money that they will be receiving from the government because of the coronavirus. And so I think that establishing this program now, letting people have a chance to receive those checks, and then think about investing them in our community is a great way to go. Of course, there are other organizations. There are various charitable organizations. There's the food pantry. There's SELF. There's the Family Resource Center. There's a number of organizations, but to invest in the community is another way to do that. And people would be donating anyway to the charitable organizations. This gives them another opportunity to use that money and to help our city. And I think by passing this now and then publicizing it, I think there will be a positive response from the community.
Counselor Ellerby, and then we'll come back to Counselor Prither.
Well, I was just pointing to Glenn.
What's that?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Glenn. Then we'll come back for Dave.
This is just a technical question aimed basically at Jessica and/or Doug. Would the purchases of these gift cards from the city or its related business entities count as a charitable deduction?
Well, we don't pay taxes, the city, and this $200,000 will be coming out of our general fund, and it'll go to the CIC. It'll be income for businesses, of course, that we purchase the cards from. So I'm not sure if I understand your question exactly.
May I try to answer it?
Yeah, that's Jessica.
Yes.
So Glenn, no, this would not be a charitable contribution because we are buying a good. So we're buying the gift cards, and then the people who then re-buy those gift cards are receiving a good as well. And so they also will not be making a charitable contribution. So what we're doing is we're buying the gift cards first, holding them, and then we're basically selling the gift cards again at the same value, hopefully to our residents at a later date. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I thank you for that. I just wanted to clarify it to the public.
Yeah, thank you.
Here, let me get.
And I think, go ahead.
David first. Counselor
Yeah.
Prither, you got a question?
Doug, do you want to answer that question real quickly before I go?
No, go ahead, David.
Okay, so first, just thanks to Doug and Jessica. I think they acted really quickly. I mean, thanks to Hamilton. I think this is really an ingenious idea. I was really happy to see that we jumped on this. And if you look at the amount of money that Hamilton with its budget, we're doing 2/3 of what they did. And so this is really a significant investment. Thing I want to say is that this is a piece of the puzzle. This is not charitable stuff. So I think we need to be thinking about how we can support the community foundation and the nonprofits and their COVID-19 fund and things like that. This is a small business stimulus. And it's a great program. It's going to inject the money, and then later the costs, in terms of the goods will have to go back out again. If we sell them in August, when people are moving into campus, it will replenish that fund. So these are taxpayer dollars, but ideally those taxpayer dollars should come back into the CIC fund. So this is not just a donation to local businesses, because these are taxpayer dollars, just so people understand that. This is an infusion that should replenish itself. Some businesses have asked, like, well, what are the rules? The CIC is still going to have to come up with the rules of exactly how we distribute and the eligibility. So I think the message is if you're a local business and you're small, you should apply. I've had people ask the question, well, like, I'm a local franchise. If you own the business, you may not own the building or the corporation, like, people, I think, should apply, and then the CIC will figure out how to distribute the money fairly. And so, what I would encourage people to do, come back to both Edna's point and other people, is that this shouldn't prohibit us as individuals from buying gift cards from our local businesses. So this should not substitute for what we might want to do anyway, like with with the dollars from the federal government. And this is different from charitable contributions to nonprofits, but I think it's really an innovative program. And I hope people apply, and I hope it makes a difference for them, because I really have appreciated how our local businesses have tried to stay open and have tried to employ people even under really difficult circumstances. And the longer people can do that, the better it is. Those people will not be at the food pantry because they're employed. So thank you again to staff for putting this together so quickly.
All right, Councilor Ragu.
I have a couple of just procedural questions. And then I know you said that they would be mailing an application to each business. And they're not, because I know on one of the earlier updates it had said you had requested for people to update their email address with the chamber. So I just wanted to make sure this is like a comprehensive thing, that they're automatically added to the list so that they get mailed this application.
Jessica, you want to take that one?
If I could. So, Ms. Ragu, we spent the past week looking at the utility bills for all of our businesses, and for each one that had an email associated with it, we now have a pretty comprehensive email list for every business in our community. And for the ones that don't have an email listed, we will then also mail those individuals a paper invitation to apply. And so I hope to get that application out tomorrow, but at this point, I feel like we have an email for almost every business. And then we'll also share it, of course, through other mechanisms like social and things like that.
And they have not been emailed about this proposal yet, right? Like they don't know about it.
No.
And then just because I was calling anyone who would answer the phone during this time to let them know about this proposal and to kind of be tuned into this meeting. And some of them, as you can imagine, English is not the only language. It was a little bit of a challenge, and they had not, for example, Fiesta Chara had a few questions. The owner of the pho restaurant had some questions. Yum Yum had a really hard time understanding the just speaking to them. And so I'm just wondering, how do we try to overcome those language barriers so that everyone can be included?
I know that I've also been walking around and speaking with business owners, and I've made a special point to go into a lot of our Asian businesses as well, just to make sure that they can watch for it. As for language barriers, we could explore trying to get it translated. I would need some assistance to know how to do that, but I'd be open to exploring that option. But I do know that I think we've been making, like John Buckholtz and I have been making a large effort to get out to everyone who we feel might not hear about it quickly or easily.
Okay.
But also, I'll just like to be clear though too, even though we have everyone's email address, not everyone opens the email. So, I mean, we have to try multiple approaches to try to make sure everyone knows about it.
Sure. Yeah, because I think everyone who I talked to had not heard of the proposal yet, and this is on Monday.
Well, and I haven't sent it out really either, so no one, right, yeah.
And then the other question is, what is the definition of locally owned business? Like, do they have to live in the city of Oxford? They have to live in Ohio? Like, what does local mean?
I personally believe that they are a resident of Oxford, Ohio. That's my definition. And I know that the CIC board has asked for kind of a rubric to score the applications that come in. And so that's one of the things that we will have to define. What does locally owned mean to us? But that's what it means to me.
So if someone lived in the township, they would be scored a little bit less.
That's up for the CIC board to decide those rules and rubrics. We can make suggestions, but David and Glenn are both on the CIC board, and they're both on the committee that will be reviewing applications.
Okay, and I think, not to keep beating on the same drum, but I'm very concerned about, I want to make sure that this is equitable for everyone and that there is nothing discriminatory about who is being considered eligible or not eligible. And I hope that we can do our best to make sure that that doesn't happen and try to be as inclusive as possible.
I think we share those values, Chantel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me get Councilor Bracken.
Thank you. So I had two thoughts that I think we should explore. So one, I should say, I approve of this. This is a great idea. Economically, it makes a ton of sense. A counter-cyclic investment is what you do in these situations. Just like we want to flatten and spread out the curve of infections, you sort of want to flatten and spread out the economic burden in this crisis. So this makes a lot of sense to me. But it is sort of a top-down look, and I wondered if we wanted to look for also a bottom-up approach. So I think we might want to consider taking a percentage of the gift cards that we purchase, and maybe a small percentage, have them distributed maybe to local charities, so those charities could potentially use them in the immediate future to maybe supply meals to families that need them, or health and hygiene products, all the stuff they normally need. And that would be a small percentage they could use immediately, whereas the August 1st date makes a lot of sense for holding off for those economic reasons we previously mentioned. And the other idea I just wanted to throw out, though I'm not sure of it, but it's something we should consider, as sort of a little bit of an insurance policy should some of the business cards we purchase, if those businesses should actually go out of business, if we could put in some stipulation where a portion of that value would be accepted at other businesses. So if one business went out, maybe that gift card could be used as another business for 50% of the original value or 25%, just a little bit of an insurance policy. And I'm not sure if that's a good policy, but it's something we should think about maybe. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Well, on the insurance policy, I mean, we realize that's a risk. And of course, if we ask another business to accept that, they didn't receive any money to begin with. So it might be something where the CIC will need to refund the money to the citizen that cannot use the card at a particular business because it went out of business. So those are some of the things we've got to work out. And I know Jason and I have had some emails about his idea, and it's a wonderful idea. But I do want to share with the public that we anticipate receiving some additional CDBG funds. A rough estimate might be as much as $80,000 that we're going to get. We basically get 10% of what the county's going to receive through this $2 trillion stimulus program. And I guess I would suggest that we consider that to help the social service agencies, because I guess this is not something that I've ever proposed before to a city council. But because we're in such turbulent times, I felt we needed to do something. And the beauty about using these taxpayer dollars in this fashion is that it would come back to us. So Jason's idea is very, very good. And it's one of the many things that we have to grapple with. But I would suggest that we focus on the CDBG additional funds we're going to get. And the other thing that follow up on Edna's comment, I mean, if I could give a plug for the Community Foundation, they've set up a special fund to receive donations. I also know that the Lions Club, for example, is purchasing gift cards from La Rosa's. They meet there. And since they can't meet there, they decided this is a way they could help La Rosa. So I'm just so impressed by our community, our state, and all the good things that are happening throughout the country. I mean, it really brings out the best in people at tough times like this. So Jason has a very good idea. And, you know, I'd like to hear from the rest of you about, you know, where we go from here with his idea.
All right, let's hear from Councilor Prithrick. He's got a hand up.
This comes back to my point before, is that this is not an omnibus kind of thing. I mean, I think we're going to need to be doing this, which is small business stimulus under the CIC, but I think we need to think about more on the charitable side as a separate thing, and supporting the community foundation and our local nonprofits. And that's great to hear about those funds coming. I mean, I would like to talk to Miami. Many university communities are partnering with their university to provide support. So I guess what I'm saying is if we think of these things as charity or social service support on one side, and I think we need to come back to thinking about that. And so the second point I would make is that as we go through this, I hope the business community can help us figure out how to redeem and sell and market these things at the end. So as the CIC is thinking about the rules, you know, some businesses, I hope that these business partners are going to help replenish the fund later. You know, some places sell gift cards. You can get $25 worth of value for $20 worth of gift card or something on the business side. So I hope in a partnership that these businesses in August can help us replenish the fund, hopefully when better times come.
Let's go up to get Councilor Snavely first, then we'll come back to.
Thank you. I support Jason's comments as far as seeing what we can do to support the community and especially people who are financially hurting more than others. But I do think that Doug's idea of using the CDBG or whatever comes out of the federal government for the stimulus package in that way is a really good idea. And I think these cards probably ought to be used as much as possible to replenish the fund. So I support Jason, and I think Doug's response is a good one.
Okay, let me get Edna first, then we'll come back to Chantel. Edna.
I'd just like to clarify that the Oxford Community Foundation is an avenue for making tax-deductible contributions to all kinds of organizations, the food pantry, you know, the and many other organizations that, and those are all tax deductible through the foundation. So that's separate from these gift cards. And so if somebody wanted to donate as people, this is why, for instance, when we were working on the aquatic center, when I was on the rec board, why we established a fund through the Oxford Community Foundation so that people can contribute to the aquatic center and get tax deductible donations. I just wanted to clarify that issue.
Okay, let me come back around to Councilor Ragu. She had her hand up.
Yeah, I totally support Jason's notion. And I think that I also, just like with Bill, I agree with what Doug had said. As long as we truly do it in the future, then, you know, I think we're all on board. And I think that the way Jason phrased it is really interesting, or I feel like more accurate, that it's a bottom up approach instead of a top down approach. This isn't charity anymore. This is people are being forced to stay in their homes, and a lot of people are deemed non-essential. And especially if you are an hourly worker, you don't have your job anymore. So I almost cringe when I hear charity, because I think this is something we're all in together. And whenever we help our small businesses, that's also us helping them out, and we're helping individuals out too. So I look forward to us making sure we're helping everyone, whether they're big or small, and working from the bottom up.
Yeah, let me go back to Councilor Ellerby.
I also concur with Mr. Bracken's proposal, but I believe that these are two separate yet parallel initiatives. And while I wholeheartedly agree that as soon as we get CDBG funding, we should immediately move forward with that proposal. the one that we have in front of us should also be moved forward so that we can get at least one of the streams working as soon as possible.
Back to Mr. Bracken.
Yeah, and that would be fine. I was just wondering, do we have estimates on when that funding might be coming and how it looks in terms of need, like when it will be available and whether that's the right time for it?
Mr. Elliott.
We're in communications with the county weekly, and they're going to notify us as soon as they get further information. I mean, there's so much being rolled out at the federal level. You know, the payroll protection program that many of our businesses are applying for, other SBA programs, you know, the $1,200 going to individuals. So as soon as we find out, well, we will let you know, you know, and you know, I would like to add that Sam Perry, our community development director, has been in at least weekly contact with many of our social service agencies, because we realized early on that we wanted to keep in touch with them. They provide a vital service. And he asked them weekly, you know, is there anything the city can do? And so I don't know, Sam, if you want to add something to that.
I would, yeah, that's correct. I've been checking with them a couple days each week, and we haven't had any shortages that I'm aware of labor or funds, and they've actually been helping each other. If one has more availability of labor, then they'll share, of course, being safe, keeping safe distances and following all the protocols. But I think they're okay right now. I know the FRC is more concerned about long-term impacts, and that's going to be a different question when we start to realize what the long-term impacts are. But I think for now they're in good shape.
All right. Let me go back to Councilor Ragu had her hand up.
Just to circle back on the 4 people that fortunately will not be evicted until May 31st. I'm not sure if the Family Resource Center, since they do help with rent assistance, if that is something that they can maybe help out with these 4 individuals we know are already affected by this. I'm sure there's privacy issues there, but I don't know if we can somehow close that gap. Especially if it sounds like they have all the money they need to help with rent assistance, then it seems like they could help out these 4 people.
Yeah, I don't know if the ones that are dealing with the eviction are caused by the current crisis or it's caused by something else. So, you know, if anyone is welcome to go to the FRC and request assistance, and they may not have done that. So, but yeah, I don't know how to make that link, if it's even of interest to the victim, if you will.
We come back around, Mr. Snavely.
If there's no objection, I'd like to call the question.
All right.
Seconded.
All right. Mr. Kennard, will you please call the roll?
Indeed, I will. Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithrick,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
and Ms. Southard,
Yes,
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes.
You're
And I
doing a
will,
good job, Chris.
I'll get the hang of this soon enough.
and I will remind everybody that we pass this under as an emergency, so it will go into effect immediately. It won't have to wait 90 days. I'd also like to leave on our radar for the next meeting, continued discussion about our nonprofits and continued talk with them. And if it looks like they need additional funding, we can certainly figure out a way to pass an ordinance to give them a little bit more too if they need it. So good discussion on that, everybody. Really good. Okay, so from here, we will move on to our second first reading, also being passed in emergency. So Mr. Kennard, if you will read that, please.
An ordinance approving the creation of a new fund for the 2020 operating budget to provide for a grant to the Oxford Community Improvement Corporation and to account for a small business loan program and declaring an emergency.
Move adoption.
Second.
Seconded.
Thank you. All right, staff? Wait, Doug, we can't hear you. Turn your microphone on.
Oh, well, I'm using my phone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. For some reason, couldn't get the computer microphone to work, so I apologize for that. So as the title that was read states, this will create a special revenue fund, small business loan fund, and this will authorize the finance director to create this fund, and this will allow us to make the distribution to the CIC of $200,000 and allow us then to account for the money that's spent to purchase gift cards and when the money comes back in to create an ongoing revolving loan fund. And I would recommend adoption of this as an emergency as well. Be glad to answer any questions.
Council discussion? Pretty cut and dry. We just, this just establishes a fund to put the 200,000 in so it can be sent to the CIC. All right, if there's no further discussion, Mr. Kennard, would you please call the roll on this?
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithrick,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely. You need to unmute.
Sorry, yes.
And Mayor Smith.
Yes. This ordinance is adopted and will go into effect immediately. At this point, we have one second reading. So Mr. Kennard, if you will please read that.
An ordinance amending number 3538, supplemental budget ordinance number 3 to make supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2020.
Motion to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. Staff?
So we have 3 items on this amended supplemental appropriation ordinance. The original one was the $13,900 for MIS services. And then the second one, which I believe is new then, was to allow us to receive the grant from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation in the amount of $8,385. And we'll be using this to purchase safety hoods, safety equipment for the fire division. The third one is, of course, the $200,000 so that we can make the transfer to the CIC from the general fund. And we don't need to pass this as an emergency because it's on for a second reading, and any ordinances dealing with finances are effective immediately. But I do recommend passage of this, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
All right. I don't think we have any public comments slated for this. So any council questions or discussion? I'm not seeing any. Mr. Kennard, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bracken,
Yes.
Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithrick,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu. Did you hear something? I'm
You
sorry.
cut out.
Oh, yes.
Thanks.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes. And that ordinance is also adopted. We'll move on to announcements and communications. Depending on which agenda you had, we still had a discussion item about the moratorium for evictions, but since we passed our resolution, I don't know if anybody wants to discuss this anymore. So I think we made our statement there. So I will move on to remarks from City Council staff, and we'll start with Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to do a shout out to all of my staff. They're working under very unusual circumstances, and they are doing an excellent job. I just can't say enough about all of my staff that I have the pleasure and the honor of working with. And we're continuing to provide all of our essential services, making adjustments along the way due to changes in federal regulations that affect our operations and affect the entire community. So I just want to say thank you publicly for the outstanding work that everyone is doing with the city. you know, they're just as anxious as anybody in this situation of, you know, contacting the virus. And so we are practicing, you know, all of the safe physical distancing and hygiene and still getting the job done. We have a number of employees working from home, and I just thank them very much for their heroic efforts. As you know, we're going to continue to keep the buildings closed. The municipal building that I'm in right now, Jessica's in, even though she looks like she's in a bed of tulips. And the recreation building will be closed. And of course, the fire station is closed to the public. And the police, we do have the lobby open, but you know, all those buildings will be closed through April 30th. And you know, we are continuing our present staffing arrangements, doing the best that we can under these extreme circumstances. So thank you, staff. And I think the last thing I'd like to remind everyone, which we of course all know, is that this is the census time. And of course, we're very concerned about the undercount that we're probably going to experience, since probably 3/4 of the off-campus students have left. And hopefully they're going to check their mail when they come back to move out. But Sam has asked the Census Bureau to take into consideration the circumstances that we're dealing with in a college town like the city of Oxford, because once we get through this crisis, and we will, and eventually we'll get back to normal, it's very, very important that we get an accurate count. So please, citizens listening, if you haven't filled out your census form, please do so. And that's all I have this evening, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Green, do you have anything you'd like to add tonight?
Nothing more this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I was told I could skip Chief Jones, but I thought I would ask him anyway if there's anything you wanted to input.
Nope, I'm just here in case you have questions. Thank
All
you.
right, fantastic. Mr. Kennard, is there anything you'd like to add tonight?
Nothing further, thank you.
All right, then we'll just go around the horn to best my memory. So we'll start with Councilor Ragu tonight. If you have any remarks.
Yeah, I just have a couple. You know, this past week they sent out a notice across the state of Ohio for veterinarians to sign up for the hospital surge. So if everyone does not stay home, you're going to have a veterinarian taking care of you in the hospital. So dear God, stay home, because dogs and cats a lot more. And I think the other thing that is important whenever we look at the federal stimulus plan and then what the state is doing is that everything looks so good on paper. But it's important for us to look at where the gaps are and who are the people and businesses falling through the cracks. So I think that is something to really, this is this ongoing process that we need to constantly making sure that we are trying to take care of everyone. And we're not just saying, oh, the federal government's got it, the state government has it, because there's a lot of people that will not be receiving the $1,200 stimulus check, and they are exempt from it, and they desperately need it.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on to Mr. Ellerby.
Thank you, Mike. First thing is I have to shout out the city of Oxford and the staff. I mean, you guys have done some monumental stuff here. I mean, we're having a virtual meeting right now. You know, we went from pretty much business as usual to completely changing the way a lot of things are done, and you guys have handled it in stride. And for that, I thank you. Citizens of Oxford, please be considerate of each other. And what I mean by be considerate of each other is, if you don't have business that requires you to be out in public, please stay home. If you do have business that requires you to be out in public, please be considerate of the individuals that are helping you. I've heard far too many stories about individuals that are yelling at the workers because of things that are out of their control. And these individuals are risking their lives to serve you. So please just be considerate of that. And then finally, make sure that you wash your hands and you wash your face and you wash your clothes so you can be considerate of yourself and maintain your own personal health. because, I like the town, I like the people that are here, and I want to make sure that everybody stays as healthy as possible.
You're here. All right, we'll move on to Mr. Snavely.
Yeah, I just would like to echo Glenn and hear his comments and Chantel's, and also the city manager. I think that our city staff has been doing a fabulous job. I really appreciate them. They come in under very difficult situation, and I hope that the citizens of Oxford will appreciate them and, cut them a little slack here and there as they try to go about doing their business and staying healthy. Also want to join Glenn and others shouting out to the citizens of Oxford. And I realize that there are some issues that Glenn was referring to, but by and large, I'm really proud of our community. People are abiding by the rules by and large, at least what I've noticed. There are people walking probably more than they've walked before on the sidewalks and keeping social distance. Our neighbors in our neighborhood have been talking to one another, but from across the street. And I think that's kind of what we have to do. And if everybody plays their part, we'll get through this. And knock on wood, it's not horrible in Oxford right now, and I'd like to keep it that way. So kudos to our city staff. I'm always so proud of the people who work for the city of Oxford, and I'm very proud to live in the city of Oxford. Wonderful citizens and community members, and let's all stay healthy.
You're here. All right, Councillor Southard.
I won't repeat what everybody else has said because I endorse everything you've already said, but I do want to add that everybody, it seems to me, people are doing everything they can to help each other, and that's really very heartening. People are coming together, they're helping each other in all kinds of ways if they can. And in our neighborhood, and I'm very proud of my neighborhood, so I'm going to brag a little bit. In my neighborhood, an email went out saying, hey, why don't we exchange phone numbers and emails? We soon had a list of about 40 people, 40 emails of all of homes in the area. So if somebody needs help, then they can call somebody, which I think is really great. And everybody is checking in on each other. And so we have such a list. One of the first things that happened was people said they're sewing face masks. Well, could you donate? Does anybody have elastic? There's no elastic around. I was able to provide some elastic to some people. So people are sharing resources and helping each other to accomplish things to help each other. Another thing that happened was that to cheer up the children in our area, there's this website called Bear Hunts, and so the kids go around and they count the teddy bears that they see. Within a couple of hours, there were 56 teddy bears on people's front porches. So I mean, I think that's kind of amazing that finding ways to keep up their spirits and to check in on each other, to just keep our community going, because people have gotten sick, as we know. We are all hoping for those people, and we hope that people will be able to recover, and we hope that those who are not sick will be able to stay healthy. So I'm also very grateful to the city, not only for what you've done, but also for pulling together virtual meetings. I think this is really important, and I'm glad you're doing it. So thank you for that. I've only heard some complaints, and that is that there are some young people, people of college age, who are in town, and we know that there are still parties going on, and I know that the police have been dealing with that, and they've done a very good job doing that, but it's a perpetual problem, and we all, as springtime comes, it's going to be something even more that citizens can help. I think the police and the city by letting people know that these are a problem, and that these are problems, and that these parties, the people attending these parties, could be reminded that, this is not safe to do. and they should be careful. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Bracken.
Yeah, being second to last, everyone's already said everything that I had planned to say. Thanking staff, absolutely. Thank you for everything you do. Thanking our service providers, all of them. And, be compassionate, be considerate, stay safe, look out for each other.
All right. Councilor Prithrick.
So yeah, I think it bears repeating. Oxford is always a wonderful community, and it's proven itself to be really a wonderful community. The city is doing a phenomenal job, and so my thanks. It could go from my neighbors who sewed me a mask to the first responders who are in direct. Who put themselves at risk, to the people who are making, the employers who are paying people to make food to keep our economy going. I'm thankful to have an employer. We have many employers which have not furloughed people yet. So we have a lot to be thankful for. I guess I would just like to express the hope that we maintain this attitude for the long haul, because I think we cannot underestimate. Even just again, from the epidemiological point of view, this is not going to be all over very soon. And looking at the jobs numbers in the United States, there's going to be a lot of adaptation to historically difficult circumstances. So we in the city, if the citizens don't know it or are already looking at ways to tighten the belt, the university is looking at this. We're going to have to be very adaptable, because we simultaneously need to kind of be in a defensive posture, but we've not just even begun to do some of the proactive things we can do to help our community through this, like some of the social service agencies. So I think tonight's just like a down payment on, I think, a lot of the work we're going to have to do in the future to deal with this crisis, while also hopefully continue to move forward on some of the things we've been talking about for a long time. So thank you to everyone for, proud to be part of Oxford during these times, especially.
All right. I have a hopefully not too long a list here. I first wanted to express there was some concern expressed to me yesterday when we abruptly moved our meeting from in person to online, that maybe one of us was ill, and that is not the case. We simply Doug and I were thinking more about getting things accomplished, and we were not thinking enough about our own personal safety and setting a good example. So that was the primary reason. And we have the technology, so that's why we went online. On the thank you list, I have everyone who is sewing surgical masks. I would love to know what Oxford's output is. I imagine it's in the thousands. I want to thank everyone, including several council members who are delivering groceries and medicines to our vulnerable residents. I want to thank our amazing staff at McCullough Hyde Tri-Health Hospital for everything that they're doing. Specifically, I want to thank Jessica Green and Andrew Wilson for getting everything up and online. I know this is probably the most complicated meeting we've done so far, and I think it has gone exceedingly well. Great. And on a final note, I know everybody is feeling a bit out of sorts and lost in routines, but I need everybody to keep doing what we're doing. It's having an effect. And as we've kept saying, we will get through this and we will figure it out. As the weather gets warmer, that can only help. I've got a raised hand here for Mr. Elliott. You've got a final thought?
Yes, I have one thing, and I didn't check it off. So if I did say this, I apologize, and it's certainly out of order, but I believe I forgot to mention that we received 30 comments in favor of the resolution dealing with urging the Area 1 court to deal with the eviction. So I apologize for that. I didn't check it off. I don't believe I said that, but we decided early on, since we had 30 and they were all in favor of the resolution, not to read them individually, but they will become part of the record in full in our minutes. So I did want to mention that we did receive those 30 comments.
Great.
And I apologize for not bringing it up when we were dealing with the resolution. So my fault.
That's all right. And one final plug to the Community Foundation and their COVID-19 fund. It is going specifically to all the nonprofits in our area. So if you're looking for somewhere to donate, go to the Community Foundation website. They will gladly take your donation. So everyone, please stay safe and make good choices. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Kennard, will you officially call the roll to adjourn our meeting?
Indeed, I will. Mr. Bracken. Mr. Ellerby,
Yes.
Mr. Prithry,
Yes.
Ms. Ragu,
Yes.
Ms. Southard,
Yes.
Mr. Snavely,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes. Thank you all. It was a great meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you.
Thanks.